Hello, Jeff here from Whitbird Botanical, bringing you another terrarium build. So this terrarium was made about a month ago. I just haven't had time to do the audio for it, but this is a terrarium I made for my son on his a bit after his first birthday, but for his first birthday. So as always, I started with a gravel false bottom, and then I put in a barrier layer of fly screen, and then I did a little layer of horticultural charcoal just to keep things nice and clean. Then I added my substrate mix, which is a new mix for me. It's made of cocoa fiber, cocoa chip, and some sand and sphagnum moss all mixed together, and so far it's doing really well. So once I added all that in, I just sort of tried to build a bit of a slope with the substrate, and then I worked in some hardscape. So I'm just using lava stone here, and I originally put in what I thought would look good, and then I pulled bits out, and then I just used some super glue to sort of shore up some of the rocks and move them into the position I want them to be in. After I did that, I then did a little bit with some twigs and stuff that I had just out of the garden. So I think this is mostly just some banksia and maybe a little bit of eucalyptus in there. I'm not 100% sure. I just grabbed what was around and sort of same thing. I did a dry fit, and then when I liked how it was, I just put them a bit of super glue so they'd stay where I want them to stay, and added in a little bit more substrate where I felt the levels were a bit low, and then added in some gravel chip on top just for a bit of texture and some smaller rocks and stuff. So then we moved on to planting, and I'm planting this using mostly natives. So I started with a Bulbophyllum shepherdii, which is a native orchid. It's an epiphytic orchid, so that means it grows on rocks. And I did that onto a little piece of lava stone. I just tied it on with some brown thread, and then I glued that stone in place so they wouldn't move around. And I just put a little bit of sphagnum moss on there just to help keep it a bit moist, because it might dry out. I'm not sure how it's going to go. So far it's done pretty well though. I then put in another native orchid, but this is a hybrid orchid. It's a Dendrobium speciosum hybrid. I can't remember the name of it at the moment. I'll put it up on the screen though. And I just put that in the substrate at the back in like a little shelf. Now I sprinkled in some more substrate just to fill it up a bit, and some gravel just for a bit more texture and finer details. Then I moved on to some Viola hederaceae, and this was doing well in my windowsill terrarium, so I thought I'd put it into this one, and I just put two little bits on each side of the terrarium, and hopefully they'll sort of just fill in the sides a little bit, spread around to the front of the terrarium a little bit as well over time. I then put in a Dichondra repens in the middle up the front, which I later took out and replaced with a Photonia. So it's just I don't actually know what its name is. It's just the sort of generic Phontonias you get in nurseries and stuff. So just add a little bit of different colour and texture and leaf shape to the terrarium. So I thought I'd do that because it looks quite nice. I then went through and added in some mosses. So I did a combination of star moss and thread moss for this build, and I put a few bits in, and I tried to do a little bit in the foreground and then up on the rocks and stuff as well. But once I finished this, it sort of felt a little bit light on plants. So I think that's something I'll address at some point. I'll go in and put some more plants into it. So yeah, this is gonna sit. So this is the first terrarium I'm doing. It's going to be run off artificial lighting, and I've never grown plants with artificial lighting before, so it's a bit of a learning curve for me. But all I did is I have a sort of shelf. So all I did was I went in, I bought a light that I did some research, and I found a light that I thought would work for it, and I installed that on the underside of a shelf, and I just turn that on before I go to work in the morning, and then I turn it off sort of at night, a bit after dinner, or sometimes I leave it on until I go to bed. And so far the plants are doing really well, and the light's working really well, so I've been pretty happy with that. It was only cheap, it was only like $20, and it's doing the job. In time, where this terrarium is sitting, I'm actually going to build I've got an old desk that my grandfather made that I'm just going to modify to have a shelf up off the back of it. It's going to have probably 2 or 3 shelves coming up off the back, and I'm going to put artificial lighting on it, and I'm going to use that to display my terrariums, and I'm also going to store my plant books, my ID books and stuff there as well, and probably just have a couple of random indoor plants there as well. So that'll all happen in time, but for now it's a temporary setup, and it's working quite well. But yeah, that's it for this one, guys. As always, thanks all for watching, and I'll see you on my next one. Bye for now.